he of the thugs, the thugs you abandoned, and he comes to Delhi, and this is what he writes. He's no Indophile. Sleeman is a critical observer, and he's not a Fraser or an Octoloni. He's a prickly and difficult man. But here's what he says about the education in Delhi in the 1830s. He says, perhaps there are few communities in the world among whom education is more generally diffused than among the Mohammedans of India. And this he's writing in Delhi, about specifically Delhi. He who holds an office worth only 20 rupees a month commonly gives his sons an education equal to one of our prime ministers. They learn through the medium of Arabic and Persian language what the young men of our colleges learn through those of Greek and Latin, that is grammar, rhetoric, and logic. After 7 years of study, the young Mohammedan binds his turban upon a head almost as filled with things which appertain to these branches of knowledge as a young man raw from Oxford. He will talk fluently about Socrates and Aristotle, Plato and Hippocrates, Galen and Avicenna, but call them instead Socrates, Aristoteles, Aflatun, Bokrat, Jalinus, and Abu Ali Sina. And what is much to his advantage in India, the language in which he has learned this, are those that he will be able to acquire during his public life.
I think that sums up to a lot extent what I've been trying to say. And I go a step further, and what was happening in this period also was that not only was this great tradition there, which was carrying on, but there was a lot of churning. It didn't stop there. It didn't stop at... So you have, for instance, the person that I talk about quite frequently is Master Ramchandar, for instance, the scholar of...
And you can illustrate in your lovely picture, which I've never seen before, his algebra.
Yes. So he was a mathematician who was a product of the Delhi College. He had studied English at the Delhi College, and he was a science teacher at the Delhi College as well. And he was really... He was a fascinating man because he contributed and actually founded 2 science journals where he wanted to popularize science. He talked about modern scientific discoveries in the West, about all sorts of issues, about people. He wanted to bring about this, and so these are these people who are actually engaging with the new learning that is coming in also, and want to diffuse that. There is not only this kind of scientific and modern learning being taught in the Delhi College and propagated through popular journals, but there are issues that are being discussed on things like social reform. And Master Ramchandar is again at the forefront of some of these kind of, he's a rationalist to begin with, and he talks about religion and what's wrong with religion and the kind of falsehood, according to him, which religion spreads. So these are inquiring minds who are actually coming out and discussing.
And there is a freedom,
yes, of course,
of inquiry, which is surprising.
Yes, and they are talking about all of this. So it is a very, very vibrant place, and at no, a small snippet that I always think. Emma Roberts, who writes wonderfully about this period in India as a whole.
A British traveller
British traveller, yes. And she writes this wonderful, she says that in Delhi, she's surprised that so far from Calcutta, she's travelled up country, as they used to call it, and she comes to Delhi and she suddenly sees that there's these colonial buildings. There are these neoclassical pediments and things that people are experimenting with. There are Mughal princes who are building...
in the Red Fort?
In the Red Fort, they are building buildings which are, Western inspired. So there is this great openness that is there to new influences.
There's some lovely stuff at this period. You get the impression of Delhi sucking in the talent from the country around it. And there's these nice accounts of Altaf Hussain Ali, who flees his marriage in Panipat, and he escapes at night and walks 35 miles to Delhi, alone and penniless, in sleeping rough, in an attempt to realize his dream of studying in the famous colleges. Everyone wanted me to look for a job, he wrote later, but my passion for learning prevailed. And then he gives an idea of what he's come to. He says Delhi was a celebrated intellectual centre, had 6 famous madrasas, at least 4 small ones, 9 newspapers in Urdu and Persian, 5 intellectual journals published out of Delhi College, innumerable printing presses, and 150 Unani doctors. But the biggest draw of all, he says, are the poets and the intellectuals, which we haven't yet touched upon. Men such as Ghalib, Zork, Sabai, and Azurda. By some good fortune, wrote Hali, there gathered at this time in the capital Delhi a band of men so talented that their meetings and assemblies recalled the great days of Akbar and Shah Jahan.
Hali, of course, is a very interesting man because he comes to Delhi. He does not study in the Delhi College. He studies in a traditional madrasa, and he says that in our madrasa, the general opinion was that the standard of the Arabic and Persian taught in the Delhi College was
not good enough.
Not up to the mark. But anyway, that was not the point of the Delhi College. It was meant to be essentially for the
new
teaching
learning
of English. Yes, but Hali, I think, to some extent, is also a little misleading because, again, there is one of the things that drew me to this period was the very, very conflicting views we often have of it. Because at one, there is that whole sense of nostalgia, which comes later, the later writing, the later summing up of this period that happens after 1857 tends to romanticize this period as a period of the Mughal high point, not high point at twilight, but a pristine Mughal culture which 1857 suddenly destroys. So the idea that there was a lot of ferment, that there was a lot of questioning is often glossed over. And one of the things that I've attempted really in this book is to think of, look closely at some of the great minds of that time and what they are doing and saying. And these are people in the field of Urdu poetry, these are people in the field of intellectual life of all sorts. And there is, in fact, a great deal of questioning of the old culture as well. It is not as if, the people of Delhi now, Hali almost seems to suggest that, there is this, it's a cocoon and people are, it's that old Mughal dominated culture that is there. You cannot have the East India Company in this period opening things like the Delhi College and still hope that nothing has changed. It will not, that's not true. So there is a lot of questioning that is happening. And Master Ramchandar is one person that I've mentioned, but even Ghalib is beginning to, he has, Ghalib, by the way, is one of the most forward-looking people that we have. So he is, of course, he's a great poet in the classical tradition, but he's open to all sorts of new things. He's talking about, in some of his letters, you find him telling his shagids that, in this day and age, you should use English words in your poetry also. That's quite fine. English is now used in this country. When Sayyid Ahmad Khan, the loveliest story is of Sayyid Ahmad Khan, who was a young man of Delhi at the time. And he wrote a translation of the Ain-e-Akbari, a critical edition of the Ain-e-Akbari of Abul Fasl. And he asked Ghalib to write a foreword. And of course, we are all very familiar with that because Ghalib is a celebrity. And if he writes a foreword to this book, it's going to sell well. So Ghalib writes this foreword in which he says, and it was in verse, it was in Persian verse, and he actually says, this Honorable Sayyid has spent so much time on this outdated text of the Ain-e-Akbari. Maybe you should have spent a little bit more time talking about all the wonderful new inventions we have now.
Ghalib had been to Calcutta, hadn't he?
Yes.
And on the way he saw railways, he saw electricity, yes, the telegraph, and he's very enamored by it. And he saw Varanasi, and he loves
Yes.
Varanasi.
Yes, exactly. So,
Yeah.
so that kind of ferment that is there, we tend to, and it makes the picture so much more rich than these cliches that we've often been, handed out. So it is a interesting debate.
Describe for those who don't know it the poetic world of Delhi at this period, the mushairas, the